So whether you like it or not, Liverpool are back this weekend, and they really do need to get back to winning ways as well after that little mini resurgence was halted prior to the international break by a fully deserved defeat to Manchester City. And in theory, it's a bit of a gentle reintroduction to the Premier League, with 19th placed Nottingham Forest visiting Anfield on Saturday. In fact, it's actually the start of a run of games where the average position of the opposition across the next 9 league games is just 14th. So should be a run really where Liverpool can get some form going, can get some wins together, and hopefully that will improve the league position. However, of course, there are some difficulties in there. We know Premier League fixtures are hard as it is, but particularly when you look at Forest, and they have recently changed the manager, haven't they? They're feeling a little bit better about themselves, and you have to remember that this is a squad, while they've had so much trouble this season, it's a squad that finished 7th last time out and did qualify for Europe. So you can make a case for it being an easier fixture and also a difficult one as well. But either way, I wanted to look at the challenges that Forest pose now under Sean Dyche and what Liverpool really need to do well to go on and win this team. And at the end, I am also going to pick my selection for this one, as I usually do. And I think I'll start with the area that's changed under Dyche the most, really. It's kind of, there's one thing that we know about Sean Dyche when he comes into a club. It's that he wants to get his teams defensively drilled, make sure they don't give up chances. And he has definitely done that despite only being 5 games into his reign. And I'll quickly bring up a graphic here that really underlines that. You can see he's only managed 5 matches so far, and he's still got 4 of the top 5 defensive performance in expected goals terms already this season for Forest. So they're just not being given up very many chances at all to the opposition since Sean Dyche has come in. And I mean, the speed with which he's been able to do that, you have to say. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea in terms of the style of play his teams play, but I mean, he really is good at drilling the defence and doing it very quickly. And you look there, the worst performance was against Manchester United, and even then quite unlucky to concede 2 goals from giving up just 1.2 expected goals. I mean, anyone who saw Amad Diallo's goal will know that that was a bit of a stunner, really, and maybe Forest were a little bit unlucky in that. So clearly, Forest under Sean Dyche, despite it being so early in his reign, they are a side that do not give up much, and so you really do have to be clinical. I mean, in this run, they conceded twice to a Bournemouth side that only generated 0.6 expected goals. That's the level of clinical you need to be against this side. And I have to say that's maybe a slight worry for Liverpool, because they haven't necessarily been that all through this season. They are underperforming expected goals in the Premier League. In the last 5 games, they generated 7.1 expected goals and scored 5 goals. So quite a large underperformance there. And, you know, I always think that the top teams in Liverpool in seasons where they have been good in recent memory, they've tended to overperform their expected goals. So any underperformance in a game like this is where you can come unstuck, because Forest won't give you too many chances. So the ones that you get, you're going to have to take. And I mean, that's kind of a collective thing. Everybody throughout the squad needs to get the shooting boots on, absolutely. But I also think someone like Alexander Isak, if he can be fit, if he can come out of this international break fit and firing, and, you know, even if you just use him off the bench, that might be handy. And of course, he's been someone who hasn't really performed too well in terms of putting his chances away so far this season, but we know how good he is. So can this be the game he clicks or comes off the bench, or can anybody else contribute in terms of goals? They'll certainly have to against this Forest defence. Of course, goals haven't really been a massive issue generally, despite those finishing issues Liverpool have. You know, only 5 teams have scored more than them in the Premier League so far. But we know what the biggest issue is. It's conceding goals, and only 7 teams have conceded more than Liverpool so far this season in the Premier League. That defence has been a real worry for every Liverpool fan, hasn't it? And if you have one real concern about what Forest are going to do here, it's that they might be the kings of kind of exploiting Liverpool's biggest defensive weakness, which we think has been, and I think anyone who's watched Liverpool this season, it's clearly been long balls, hasn't it? Direct play. They haven't dealt with that particularly well, have they, so far this season? And what you can see, I'm going to show you now, that they've really, really made a pronounced shift in a certain direction. Of course, we know Nottingham Forest in the early part of this season, few games with Nuno, then they made the change to Ange Postecoglou. They really wanted to kind of play tiki-taka football, if you want to call it that, really passing easy on the eye football. And it's been a real shift in the other direction since Dyche has come in, and really pronounced, as I say. And, you know, you can see on this graphic now that I'll show you that 3 out of the top 4 games for long balls attempted so far this season by Forest have come in Dyche's first 5 games in charge. And so we know he's a direct manager. We saw his teams at Everton, we saw his teams at Burnley. They like to pass the ball about the back and then just basically launch a big diagonal and see what they can do from there. And so he's already been doing this in games so far. He's already asking his team to try those big diagonals, to be direct. And you just think he's probably going to turbocharge it for this one, isn't he? Let's be honest, because he'll know it's Liverpool's weakness. You know, that's one of the really good reasons Liverpool have not been very good at defending direct play. But also, it's kind of another flip side to why you would want to do this when you come into Anfield as well, which is that Liverpool cannot nick the ball off your defence if you are just hitting it upfield as quickly as you can. You know, it loses all pressing opportunities for Liverpool. It means that you're a lot less likely to commit an error leading to a goal because you're not trying to thread passes through the midfield or asking your defenders to do too much. So there's a couple of benefits there. And as I say, because it's Liverpool, because everybody knows this is a weakness and all the analysts in the Premier League have already spotted this, we're going to see an awful lot of this from Forest. And, you know, even if they are already a team that likes to play a long ball, we're going to see even more of it in this game, I would say. And, you know, as I say, it's been a real talking point around Liverpool this season. And it's interesting that they've had a break from it, really, in the last 3 games. Aston Villa, Real Madrid, Manchester City, all teams that wanted to play out from the back. So I think this is an important one for Liverpool, this game, because it's going to be kind of we have talked about it so much. So this is a real test of, okay, well, what have you learned then? You know, since you think back to the kind of Brentford game where that was probably the most disastrous in terms of facing direct play and being completely unable to deal with it. What have Liverpool learned? What have they solved? Have they been able to kind of fix it? And, you know, I've talked about physicality being a real issue and maybe this being one that Liverpool are probably going to be best placed to solve in the transfer market. But there are some kind of areas where they can tactically improve how things play out for them in terms of long balls. And I've kind of got a situation here that I've picked out from that Brentford game. And they were, of course, very, very direct. To kind of give you an example of where I think Liverpool, okay, even if you're not going to add physicality to the team, this is where you can be better in those long ball situations. So I'm going to show you the first kind of screenshot here from early in the game. And you can see Brentford at this point to get the ball to kind of left back. They've played out from the goalkeeper, Queevy and Kelleher. And you see Liverpool have pressed them into a kind of uncomfortable situation. The left back is out there with the ball. You know, he's kind of tight. He's got the line also marking him on the other side. Liverpool have really kind of boxed them in quite nicely. So in terms of being a pressing team, this is not a bad situation for Liverpool. They've done quite well. They've moved Brentford to an area where they did not want to be on the pitch. But important thing to note here is you can see on this shot, you can see Florian Wirtz, you can see Curtis Jones, and you can see Dominic Szoboszlai. That is Liverpool's entire midfield for that game, locked on and pushed up to prevent any playing out. They're doing it well, in fairness, but they are pushed up. They're an awful way, far up the pitch, really kind of aggressive in that press. And I think one thing that's key here is you can see Jones here, where he's locked in on Damsgaard for Brentford. That is particularly key here. So I'll take you to the next kind of shot there, and it shows you that forces a long ball. And Konate and Van Dijk, I know you said criticising Liverpool's ability to deal with long balls. They're actually 2 of the best in the league in terms of dealing with aerial threat. So, they are very, very good. High aerial win rates, do really well in terms of that. And you can see here, Van Dijk gets up to win the header, as he generally does. He's almost an outlier, really, in terms of his ability to do that. And Liverpool always keep a +1 at the back, don't they? So a 4v3 in this situation to ensure that it doesn't turn into a 3v3. So they're not in a bad position there, really, in terms of how they're defending it. However, you can't really control where the header goes, or at least not all the time. Sometimes we'll see Van Dijk won't be a nice little nod down to his fullback or to his centre-half partner, or take it on his chest really calmly. But you can't always do that. Sometimes you're going to be under pressure. And you can see the Brentford centre-forward here puts Van Dijk under enough pressure that he's just got to kind of head it away. And then what happens here, and they'll move it on to the next one now, is that you can see Van Dijk's clearance when it lands. There's Damsgaard, and he's already run off Curtis Jones. Now, you saw him a few shots back that Damsgaard was kind of the Brentford side of Jones, absolutely fine. But what's happened in the meantime is that Damsgaard's not thought, okay, this long ball's gone, we've given up possession, what a shame. He's thought, there's potential here for me to win a second ball. And so he's kept his run going. And when you play this clip kind of forward, you can see he gets on his bike, he really starts to sprint at one point, and Jones, he's not alert to the danger, he doesn't keep up with him, and a situation there where the ball is kind of falling into Damsgaard's path. Now, Liverpool actually, in this situation, they get away with it. The ball just bounces past Damsgaard. He's like kind of agonisingly close to it. But that is a really, really dangerous situation there. One that's been developed because Liverpool have pressed. They've been pressing quite aggressively, which of course is absolutely fine as a tactic. But they've not had in the back of the mind, when we force them to play along, which is the aim of the press, we've got to be there as well to kind of sweep up second balls, to consider the fact that there are going to be knockdowns. And I think it's really important in these situations, and it's something Curtis Jones did not consider, is, I've got to make sure Damsgaard doesn't run past me once this ball is played. We can be aggressive, but let's be switched on about what's going to happen behind us as well. So that's kind of a tactical thing to think about, really. And I think it's worth bearing in mind, particularly because around this Forest game, because Forest are going to want Liverpool to press, in a sense. They're going to want to create those kind of gaps between the midfielders and the defence. So almost invite them into the press, go long to maybe Chris Wood and hope there's going to be a knockdown there. And your midfielders, they've got loads of energy. I think of Elliot Anderson as a great example, Morgan Gibbs-White. He will push on then, and they'll make that sprint as Damsgaard did in that situation, and they will be alive to second ball. So Liverpool, as much as they might want to be kind of aggressive in the press there, just be smart about it, really. And I think it will be helpful as well, by the way, that Ryan Gravenberch is going to be there. You know, he didn't start that Brentford game. He's probably Liverpool's most switched on player in terms of those kinds of things, his positioning, his ability to hoover up second ball. So I think he will help there. But as I say, that's a real kind of insight, I think, into the fact that this is, as much as a physicality issue at times, you know, set pieces, throw-ins coming into the box, sometimes it's about being smart and knowing about your positioning and being positioned for second balls. And I think in that situation, and quite a few situations against Brentford, Liverpool weren't in the best position in there. So hopefully Gravenberch and a bit of a kind of team talk beforehand, a bit of training, a bit of kind of discussion of this issue can really help and mean that Liverpool will be better at dealing with those second balls. And I will also say it's much harder for a Nottingham Forest, for a Brentford, for anyone who plays direct, to kind of get away with playing that way away from home. You know, the way that the game goes, the way that Liverpool will be a little bit more dominant, the way they'll probably have a bit more zip in getting in challenges, probably more, it's easier for them to deal with it than when they're at Forest away, the ball's swirling in the air, the crowd's up, the atmosphere is kind of impacting you in a negative way. So hopefully you combine all those things, Gravenberch back, talking about second balls and really emphasising how important, and of course the fact it's at Anfield, that should help Liverpool deal with it. But they do have to be clever about this, they have to be wary of it, because that could be the thing that decides the game, and it has too many times for Liverpool in a negative way so far this season. So, gone through a few things from the defence, a few things from the attack, and that kind of just leaves me to pick a team. And I'll be honest, I felt like this one, it's a little bit of a nightmare, really. I think so many tough calls to make in here. I think left wing, midfield, the composition of those, they affect each other, what you're doing in defence in certain areas. It's not been an easy one to select at all. So I'll show you what I've gone with here, and you can see there Alisson coming in there in goal, presuming he is fit. We spoke to the manager prior to the international break, and he expected that Alisson would be back. And so if that's the case, you've got to, I think Mamardashvili's done very well, but Alisson is Alisson, and he would, if he is fit, would come straight back into the starting 11. And I was going to say the back four kind of picks itself, but I have made a change there, which might come as a little bit of a surprise. Now, I just know that Arne Slot's going to be desperate to get Kerkez in at some point, because he can't play this poorly forever. You've signed him to be an important player for this team, and I don't think you should just completely write off the idea that, it's just Robertson now, Kerkez can't be anywhere near it. He's got to play better at some point. I think he did endure a real dip before he was taken out of the team. But you've got to really hope that he can kind of get out of that. And again, there's a lot of 3-game weeks coming up now. So, that's not to say Robertson is out of the team. I mean, he could play the next 2 after this, but I just think a home game against Forest, the 19th in the table, I think Kerkez is quite good aerially. He's actually underrated in that aspect. So for set pieces, he's quite handy. I just think this is a game where, can you just introduce him gently? Can you get a performance out of him? Because, don't forget that McAllister's form was really bad for a while, and then all of a sudden, he kept putting him in the team, kept putting him in, and then it clicked. And you really hope that the kind of similar thing will happen with Kerkez. So I've kind of gone with the gamble of putting him in here. Maybe you'll disagree with that, but I do think the manager will be keen. And of course, there are a couple more games this week where Robertson could absolutely play. In midfield, I've gone with no Alexis Mac Allister because international duty going away with Argentina. I think you've got to be really kind of careful with him. We've seen it before. Forest at Anfield after an international break last season, Mac Allister did not play particularly well, and I do think that the challenge of doing that is difficult for him. So just protect him from that one, take him out of the team. And I did consider going with Curtis Jones here. He probably does deserve a start for his performances so far this season, but I've gone with Florian Wirtz, and again, might be controversial going with him in central midfield because it's not really worked so far this season, but he's played really well for Germany over the international break, and I think it's really important you've got to get £116 million signing into the team. And I talked about left wing being a real solution position for him in terms of it helps Liverpool, it helps him. But I also think that in a game like this where you're going to have so much possession, you're going to hopefully create chances, and you would think so. Having a goal scorer like Gakpo in that left wing position to stretch things, to run in behind, to have that physicality at the back post to head the ball, I just think you need it. And so the most attacking team you can kind of put on the pitch is Wirtz in that central midfield role, and then Cody Gakpo on that left-hand side. And I think with Wirtz, one thing to consider is, since he's kind of been moved out of that central position, a lot of his most difficult games in that area were away from home, and Liverpool have had a pretty horrible run of away fixtures actually in the start to the season. My hope is, and what I wanted to see from him, what can you do in these home games where it's kind of Liverpool have got 70% of the possession and they've got the capabilities to create chances. These are the games against a low block as well that he was bought for, and I know his form hasn't been great, but you've got to get him there some point. So maybe this is the one. Maybe this is the game where, Forest will have the physicality, but they'll struggle to kind of completely impact that on the game. And I think Liverpool will dominate the ball. So to have Wirtz on the pitch, to have Gakpo as an option, Salah as an option for him, and of course Ekitike in that central role, that's a lot of kind of passing options for him to work with. So I really hope this is the one where it can kind of click for him and we can see his best, because I think he's in form. He showed it against Germany. And yeah, it's got to click at some point for Florian Wirtz. So that is my selection there. I mean, I've had more faith in starting 11s that I've picked in the past, I'll be absolutely honest. I'm not sure this is either what the manager will go with or the right selection at all. I know Kerkez, Wirtz in their positions will be controversial, maybe what I've done in midfield there. But of course, as ever, really interested to know what you guys think about that. What would you go with your team selection? What do you think are going to be the key tactical considerations here, and who are you kind of worried about from Forest? Do let me know all that in the comments. Always interested to read your thoughts on it all. And of course, I'm going to ask if you can like and subscribe. I would hugely appreciate it. We're so close to 40,000. That international breaks absolutely killed the momentum, but we're coming back into it now. It's going to be 3 games a week, a lot to talk about. So make sure you don't miss any of it by clicking that subscribe button. I'm going to wrap it up there and say I'll see you guys very soon.